Long down the right side, caught, touchdown, Washington State.
Long three.
What a catch by Phillip Bobo.
The Palouse is gonna pop.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fieldhouse Report. I'm Cougar Carlson. This is Drew Callahar, and we have a very special guest with us. Washington State's own Jack Thompson is here with us. Thank you so much for being with us, Jack.
Good to be with you guys. I've been tracking you. And I love the name Fieldhouse Report. It's pretty cool, whoever came up with that handle.
That's Drew, and I give him credit. We bounced a bunch of ideas off each other, and here we are. So, yeah.
It was an obvious choice, right at the heart of campus. A beautiful building that we've all spent a lot of time in. Peeks right over into Martin Stadium. It's what we're all about.
Absolutely. It's right in the middle, like as you say, Drew. Well, yeah, kudos to you coming up with that name.
Awesome. All right. Well, we want to know, of course, what is new in the life of Jack Thompson? You're an Eastside Coug now, living in Spokane.
My wife Molly and I made the move in June. It'll be 2 years. I have two sons on this side. Son Jack, the older of the two, lives here in Spokane with his two sons, Peyton and Tanner. I can't believe how fast they're growing. And then son Tony down in Pullman with his two sons, Brooks and Beckett. So, when you have four sons east of the mountain, you have to ask yourself, what are we doing here in Seattle in this purple stench of a place?
I love it.
Candidly, it was something that we wanted to do, and I had secretly always wanted to move to the east side. My heart was always over here because of the proximity to Washington State, our motherland, and we made it happen 2 years ago.
That's awesome. My parents actually just moved to Pullman because they were 1995 WSU grads, and the same deal. The grandkids drew them over here, but they always wanted to come back home, and they got the opportunity to do it. And I'm glad you're over here. It's been nice to see you at more Cougar events. I'm sure it's a little easier to drive down from Spokane than from the west side.
Much easier. No excuses. I got to tell you, in season of 20, this coming season of 25, this will be my 20th year of attending Cougar games. And I have a string. I've not missed a home game in those 19 seasons prior to, and now I really don't have an excuse. Being, as you say, Drew, this is nothing for me to hop in my car and drive down, hang out for the day, and come back if I need to, if I want to. If I want to stay, I stay with Tony, since he did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've always appreciated about you, Jack, is you lead by example. You show up. You stay till the end. I remember my cousin when he was going to school here was 2014. It was a game against USC. Connor Halliday went down in that one, and the score was pretty lopsided. And my cousin said it was empty stadium, hardly anybody on the alumni side. He said there was one guy right in the middle on the 50 with his rain jacket on, weathering the 40 degrees and rain, and it was Jack Thompson. And for somebody that could be in the booth, for somebody that could be on the sidelines, that you were right there in the stands in the rain, that's what being a Coug is all about.
It is, and I will tell you that goes back to my father. My father, when I was going here, my parents lived in Seattle. That's where I grew up, and they never missed any of my home games. And they would, more often than not, they would drive over. They would leave Seattle like around 2 in the morning, get here at 8. It took a lot longer to get from Seattle to Pullman back in the day. And they'd be here and stay for the game. Then right after the game, they go home, go back to Seattle. And one of the things that my dad always told me, he says, I caught every minute of your game, and I never left a Cougar game ever early. I stayed to the very end. And so, I would feel very guilty if I went to a Cougar football game and left before the end of the game. And that's just, anyone who goes to the game with me, they're in for the long haul, no matter what the score is. I'll never forget that. Gosh, there's a game my son Tony was playing, and it was against USC, and They were beating us, I kid you not, something like 50 something to 0 at halftime. And the stadium was starting to empty already. And I watched the whole game. And, that was the game that they were going to score to make it 60 something at halftime before half.
Yep.
Pete Carroll told his quarterback to take a knee.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Is this like circa 07, 08?
Oh wait,
Yes, and
I
I'll
was a
never
student
forget this.
that year. Yeah.
At the end of the game, and I stayed to the end of that game, and I heard part of Pete Carroll's interview. This is where I became a lifelong, well, yeah, a fan of Pete Carroll. And he was asked the question, "Why did you take a knee?" And he says, "Yeah, I have too much respect for this school and for our conference to do something like that." You know, and this is before halftime. He says, we knew we were going to win this game, and there are things that I just won't do. And I'm thinking, this guy's class. And, I thought of him, you fast forward to the game that I think Luke Falk was the quarterback here. And you remember when Sam Darnold got sacked
yeah,
and for the fumble and I thought of Pete Carroll, and he knew that this stuff goes, in cycles and we were on top of them, but it just, what goes around comes around. And I've seen a lot of Cougar football in my day. And that was something of all the things that you remember, I'll never forget that, what Pete Carroll did.
That's truly admirable. I grew up, I have to say, UCLA fan, but the likes of Pete Carroll, because of who he is and how he's carried himself as a coach and as a person, seem to really resonate with me. And I've always respected from him, even from the opposing sideline. I was grateful when he was the Seahawks coach too, though.
Yeah. He took us to the ultimate, didn't he?
yeah,
Yes, that was awesome.
So,
So
anyways, I digress.
okay. So, Jack, we've got a great weekend coming up next week where in Pullman we both have the QB Classic and, of course, the spring football game. What are you looking forward to the most? And yeah, share with us a little bit more on that.
Well, the QB Classic is, a golf tournament that I've hosted for, I think this is our fifth. And for me, it's always an exciting week because that's tied to the Crimson Gray game. And it's always kind of nerve-wracking for me, just all the details that have to come to fruition to make it a successful tournament, not the least of which I'm worried about the weather. We want to make sure that it's early April and hoping that weather holds out so that we have a good turnout and a fun tournament for the participants. And then as soon as that tournament's over, I'll be very relieved and I can turn my attention to enjoying the Crimson and Gray a scrimmage the next day. But I don't know if they're going to have a full-on scrimmage format like they've had in years past. I think Rogers has something different in store. But either way, I enjoy watching the last Saturday practice.
Yep.
For the spring.
Yeah. Well, I'll be there at open practice Saturday morning. Hopefully, I'm excited to see the team, see how Jimmy runs practice. It's just right up the hill for me, so not too much of a trek. Who are you the most excited about catching up with this up or during the QB Classic and during the spring game?
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing all the guys that come back. This year is a bit of a misnomer because we named it the QB Classic in the very get-go, and the hope was to bring back the quarterbacks, the quarterback club, if you will, every year. And one thing that we changed it the second year, we said, you know what, rather than having the quarterbacks come back every other year, let's invite other players. And so this year we're going to have guys like Marcus Trufant, Ruben Mays. Ruben Mays has a standing invite for me, even though it's called the Quarterback Classic. I told him right when we did the first one, you'll always be invited because, he's I think he was voted the greatest football player in Cougar football history. So you got to have him there, right?
Of
And
course.
and so there'll be some quarterbacks that'll make it. Jason Gesser, Connor Halliday will be there. Luke Falk's coming,
Right.
the greatest winning quarterback in the history of Washington State. Got to have him.
Messiah. Yeah.
I was trying to get Gardner back. He was here last year, and Mark Rippon pissed me off because he's never missed a tournament. This one he's going to miss it. He came up with some lame ass excuse. And he was very apologetic. He says, and I said, so why aren't you going to be there, Rip? And he goes, well, they're going to induct me into the Washington Commander Hall of Fame. I said, come on.
Brother. He's too big time.
You're coming to a QB Classic in Pullman, Washington? Come on. I get it. You're the MVP of the Super Bowl. Come on. So what?
Well,
What could be better than being a Coug?
Yeah, all kidding aside, I love Rip. He is one of my all-time fave guys to ever play football. Aside from the fact he was a great quarterback, a great leader, he has just a big heart. It's as big as his body. He's a huge guy. If you ever stood next to him, man, he's huge. He can crush the golf ball. But as it turns out, he had, I think he had a torn rotator cuff injury repair, and so he couldn't golf anyway. But
That makes sense.
yeah, I just want Rip there just as a friend. He's a dear friend, and couldn't be more happy and more proud of what's happening for him that weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. That's a big accomplishment. He's accomplished many things, including being a Super Bowl MVP. That's a pretty big one. So I gotta ask, how's your golf game right now? How are you playing?
Well, talking about torn rotator cuff, I'm coming off of a torn rotator cuff surgery too, about a year ago. Yeah, a year ago, and I'm recovering. I have not golfed yet, and in fact, I haven't swung a golf club in a year and a half. Even in my best days, Drew, I was never a great golfer. I was not Mark Rippon or Drew Bledsoe or Ryan Leaf. Those guys are good golfers.
Yeah. Now, was this to the throwing shoulder, or was this the other side? So
That's tough.
you haven't thrown a football yet, I'm guessing either, huh?
Very lightly with my grandsons.
Okay.
They come over and they want to throw the football. It hurts the thought that even when this thing is fully healed, it'll never be what it was. Not that I need it at this age. It's still nice to be able to. I've always said, one of the greatest things I enjoy is being able to go out and demonstrate, proper throwing technique and stuff like that. When I was doing side coaching bits, but those days are behind me, and that really sucks when you think about it.
Yep. When you give your life to something like that, it's hard to be done. I mean, any football player remembers the day that they kind of hang up their cleats or don't get a chance to do it anymore, and it changes your life. It's never quite the same. But I guess you can just turn into the running Samoan or the tackling Samoan or something.
Yeah. When you have a knee replacement, not that I was ever a runner anyway. Maybe the walking Samoan or the gimping Samoan.
Something tells me your offensive linemen owe you some reparations. I don't know if these hits came in during your college days or your NFL days, but
I never thought of that, Drew. I'm gonna have to get thought. Maybe go back and collect. It's like that NIL stuff.
exactly.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda's back.
Yeah. Does that mean that you're going to throw in for a lawsuit like Ed O'Bannon did? How far does this date back?
Yeah, he certainly put college sports into a whole new level. Not that I agree with where it's at. It's just different.
Yeah. We all have to adapt.
Yeah.
I guess in reflecting on just a little bit about how you say like your golf game's not where you want it to be, your shoulder, your knee. Among the players that you have had the opportunity to play golf with at the Cougs first QB Classic, who would you say is the best one when going out there and playing?
Well, Darren, here's another oddity. In the 5 golf tournaments that we've had, I have never played in my own golf tournament. And so, um, but I played with a lot of the guys, because when we bring in the celebrity football players, we match them up with 3 other paying customers, if you will. And but I played with a lot of players, and I'd have to say that the best golfer that I know of the bunch would have to be Ripon.
Oh,
Ripon
wow.
can, yeah, he can really crush it. But he's played in those celebrity golf tournaments down in Reno, Lake Tahoe, I think, and he's won it a couple times. So he's a legitimate player.
It's awesome. I love talking golf with you, but I also just want to get into your history, your Cougar roots. We've heard from a few people that you have a pretty awesome story about how you came to Washington State, your recruiting process. So would you mind walking us through that one?
Well, I'm not going to name names. And it's funny because the person that was recruiting me, he could have sworn that he came and showed me a good time. He is my host, right? But my memory, when I got recruited, Coach Price and this player who will remain nameless, they're driving us up to the Cub. And the Cub, back in the day, that used to be a hotel on the second floor, and that's where they put up the recruits. And so they were taking me to the Cub, and Coach Price said, he looked at my host and says, "What time do you want to, you're going to come and pick Jack up?" Because he was supposed to take me out for dinner, and then he was supposed to take me to a party and um, and show me a good time, basically. And he tells me, he says, he blurts out, "Be out front at 6:45 or something like that." And so at 6:45, I was out there, and 7 o'clock rolled around, 7:15. It's clear he wasn't coming, right? And so again, memory serves me, I started walking the campus. It was a beautiful evening, and I walked, the atrium area by Holland Library, just walking, and I'm thinking, boy, this place is beautiful. And I must have had a really lost look on my face because I swear half a dozen students walking by going to the Cub asked me, "Do you need help? Are you lost?" Again, I must have had that look on my face or something. And I was just taken by how nice, genuinely nice these students were. And so I got back to the Cub next morning. Coach Price came and picked me up, and he was smiling. He was thinking, my host showed me a good time. And he goes, "So how was it last night?" I said, "It was great. It was great." And he says, "Where'd you go?" I said, "Well, I walked the campus." And so I told him that he didn't show up, and he was like, he was blown away that happened. He was thinking, "Oh, we lost this kid, right?" And he said, "Oh man," he was very apologetic. And I said, "Don't worry about it, Coach Price. Look, I'm coming." I told him about my experience, and there are a lot of nice people here. And he was kind of relieved. And I said, "I'm coming. I'm coming just to beat his ass."
Wow,
Anyway, that was my memory.
that's awesome.
Um, you know, in addition to that, when I grew up in Seattle, I came to Seattle in 1960. I was 4 years old. I was born in Samoa, that's the nick. And when I arrived, my dad was already here. He had been in Seattle for 3 years, and they saved up enough money to send for me. And and when I arrived, my dad, who was just learning the language, and he spoke pidgin English, if you will. And he introduced me to football, and the football he introduced me to was the purple stuff, and we watched those guys every Saturday. And I grew up wanting to be a Husky, period. And I grew up in White Center, Washington, right in the shadows of Seattle. and I wanted to go there, wanted to be a big time Husky, and I knew all the players and whatnot. And then when I was getting recruited, their head coach was told, don't waste any time, energy, and effort, recruiting Jack. He's coming here. And they were right. It was a lay down recruit, basically. And he called me during that time and said, that he's going to come and visit. He wanted to visit me and my mom and dad, the home visit, right? And I said, great. And he said, I'll be there at 6 o'clock. And I had to wake my dad up because he worked at Boeing and he worked the night shift and he was sleeping. So I woke him up. He was excited, took a shower, shaved, and he never showed. And he did that twice. And there's no way I could go after that.
Yeah, that sounds like just traditional Husky arrogance if I've ever heard it.
I'd never say that, or would I? But I ended up taking the trip at my dad's request. He still wanted me to take the trip to see the University of Washington up close and in person. And it was really tempting. And as it turns out, the player's last visit is with the head coach. And I went into his office and he goes, well, and he's pretty arrogant. And he said, you ready to put on the Husky jersey and, join the Huskies? And I looked at him, and not that I was, being very brave or anything like that. But I just told him, I can't come here, coach. And he was like blown away. What are you talking about? I said, you could have done anything to me. I'd be here. And when you did that to my dad, who worshiped him, there's no way I can come to. And he told me to get the hell out of my office.
Oh,
Wow.
And he
holy
said,
cow.
he said a few other things, but
Can
Okay.
imagine.
but yeah, I said, thanks anyways, coach. And so it was baked in. I was going to Washington State. And that's a best decision I ever made. Met my wife there, met and made lifelong friends. It's the best decision ever.
I can so relate to you just saying that because I've met my wife there. I have my 2 children as a result.
Yep.
I have many lifelong friendships. I graduated in '09 and I've kept really close relationships with a lot of my college friends. And just hearing you say that, I think speaks to the culture that you already alluded to just about walking around Washington State when your recruiting host didn't show up when he was supposed to, and what that meant to you, and basically what it means to be a Coug.
Yeah. Dan, I'll also share this with you that in many respects, I looked at my time in Pullman, that experience that I had. I was born in American Samoa. I was raised by Samoan parents, and you talk about culture, right? And there are a lot of similarities, as corny as that may sound, there are a lot of similarities in the island culture and family and the close knit and the loyalty that is bred in you that I saw and felt, going to Washington State and it being that trip there, it was a very warm, welcoming environment and something that, I really, really obviously cherished. And to this day, I think a lot of those elements may not be entirely, how can I put it, consistent throughout, but, the same loyalty, the same feeling of family and may not always be there. I mean, I think social media has done us an injustice in many respects. Every once in a while, I know people say, you have a Pollyanna outlook on life. Maybe so, but it hurts me when I read things like on diehard Cougs. They're anything but diehard Cougs. And I really challenge them to look in the mirror. And some of the things that are said are just blow me away. And again, in the way I was raised, you would never do or say things, the kind of stuff that you see. You see a lot of crap on social media, but I never thought that I'd see as much of that crap emanating from so-called cougars.
I know that I'm obviously newer to this process of being a Coug, and only since '07, but it infected me early, and I've never looked back, and just grateful. And to be sitting here, 18 years later after, driving up on my own thing with my folks and missing a plane flight and not knowing much about Washington State Cougar athletics. But then when I got there, I learned about game day. Okay, I've got to make it like 3 hours early before every game. And then, like, okay, who are these players? What's the history of Washington State? And like really studying and knowing, like, obviously who you are and what you mean to Washington State. Sitting here 18 years later is kind of like a dream come true and a full circle moment for me. So I'm grateful in such a unique and different way.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom had a saying for that, and I hope you can appreciate it. She'd say, "Well, that's the way it should be is." Yeah. She had a way of coming up with one-liners like that, and at the end of the day, we're Cougs. One thing I can't stand is I would tell quarterbacks this, and you can talk to several of them over the years. I would say, you're a really talented guy, but just do me a favor, don't be a dick. No, seriously, that's not. Again, I may be looking through, with rose-colored glasses, but again, this is the way I was raised. Life's too short to be a dick. Treat people right. And I will say this, that I couldn't be more proud of the Cougar quarterback club that we have. The guys in it are really, really top-notch individuals and grown to be great guys, great fathers, great Cougs. Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Darren.
Yeah. One of the common threads I feel like I notice amongst the quarterbacks that are in that fraternity is toughness, leadership, and just their overall magnetic people. They're not leaders because they wanted to be leaders. It's natural for them. You think of guys like Luke, Connor, like those guys, because of the way that they played the game, drew their teammates into them naturally and then handled it with class once they were in that position.
Gardner, I'll tell you, Zevi possesses a lot of those qualities. He, there are elements about Zevi's game and his personality reminds me a lot of Gardner. Now, I hate to put that kind of pressure on him, but you know what? That kid can deal with pressure. He's good. He's really good. And on top of that, he's a great kid. Great young man. He's not a kid. He's a great young man. In that respect, we're very lucky. Hey, quick side story about the Cougar quarterback thing, right? In 1995, Drew, me, and Mark, we hosted a broader QB Classic, and we came up with the idea of doing something great for our school, but the format was we would bring on current quarterbacks in the NFL, and Drew and Mark were playing. So they invited their buddies, and then I invited former quarterbacks. A lot of the quarterback names you may not know of, but these are guys who played in the NFL. And so we would have this tournament, and it was, wow, it was incredible. John Elway came, Moon came, and I'll never forget it. I was at a tee box at one of the holes, and Mark Brunell, was a good guy. He
Just
came
picked the
up.
wrong school.
What's that?
Just picked the wrong school.
Yeah, just poor guy with bad judgment. A good guy with bad judgment, rather. He comes up to me at the hole, and we're just staying there. He goes, how do you guys do that? I said, do what? He goes, this. And he goes, you guys actually like each other, don't you? And I said, yeah, we do. We like and respect each other, and we're doing this for our school. He says, that's it. I don't think there's any other school that has that inbred in them. And you guys just generally get along with each other. I said, well, that's nice of you to say so. But I think it goes all the way back to what you were talking about, Darren. It's our culture. Whether you're a football player or a student, it doesn't matter. Basketball player, there's definitely an it factor that exists within the Cougar family.
All right, Jack. Well, I want to jump you into a time machine here. We're going to go back to September 10th, 1977 in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
The Cougs walk in heavy underdogs to the number 15 Nebraska Cornhuskers. The Throwin Samoans under center. Take us back to that game. What still stands out to you to this day?
A couple things. Our coach, one of my 4 head coaches, Warren Powers, the year before, he was the defensive back coach at Nebraska. And so when he came to be our head coach, he brought along with him a lot of coaches from the Nebraska staff. One of them was Jim Walden, and he was our offensive coordinator. And Coach Powers also brought with him, huge experience as a Cornhusker coach and player. And that spring football, he had us prepared to go, he had us shooting for that Cornhusker game because he's going home. It was the first game of the year. And in so doing, he had us prepared. He would have pictures of their stadium, and he would describe to us how it's going to be. There'd be 77,000 people all in red. And the morning of the game, we got there. The morning of the game, Coach Powers brought out the newspaper, the sporting page, the cover, and on it had the caricature of the Cornhusker dragging a beat up cougar by the tail. And the predicted score was it was a caricature, right? In the background had scored 42-20, them killing us. And he gave us a pep talk that, wow, just really got us revved up. And then we got to the stadium, and boy, oh boy, when you walk through those the tunnel going out to the field, it was incredible, just as he described it. But what happened was when we got out and we were stretching, evidently one of the freshman guys was late coming. I guess he was getting taped, and he was coming out of the locker room late. And Coach Powers said, you better go get. I won't say his name, because what happened was this player who came out late, freshman, he was looking around and he was like totally intimidated. And our uniforms were the exact opposite of the Cornhusker uniforms. They had red tops, white bottoms. We had red bottoms, white tops. And so he just mistook it. And as he was walking towards us, he plunks down and he's stretching with the Cornhusker team. And Coach Powers told me, go get that idiot. And it was kind of embarrassing because, I go over there and now the Cornhuskers are just cracking up, right? I said, get over here. I think his first name was Steve. Once the game started, it was as if we were there. That we had practiced there, we had played there before. It was all the pre-planning that Powers had embedded in our minds about, this is how it's going to be. And when we got there, we played like we'd been there before. And we walked away with an upset. And the last memory I have of playing there was as we were running off the field, we noticed that around the locker room door, to go the visitors' locker room door, there had to be 40,000 Cornhuskers who remained, and they're giving us a standing ovation.
Wow.
That was classy.
Yeah, that is class.
And as we were walking out and, going to the buses, and as we were driving away, so many Cornhuskers, waving and saying, good game, guys. And the whole,
Nice.
just sportsmanship extraordinaire.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys made Cougar Nation very proud that day. Unlike Darren, I was born into Coug, the Coug family, so I've been pretty much brainwashed from the time I was 2 years old. I didn't watch superheroes. I watched old VHS tapes of the 1998 Rose Bowl and heard the legends and the stories. And my grandparents talked about sitting together, listening to the radio, and just it being a surreal feeling, like we beat Nebraska on the road, us, the Washington State Cougars.
Yeah, it was special. It's special today. I talked to my teammates. I had 2 wide receivers who are phenomenal. Mike Levenseller, who went on to be wide receiver coach at Washington State for 20 years with Coach. Brian Kelly, who he caught 2 touchdown passes in the game. And he went up to Canada and played Edmonton Eskimos, and now is in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. And so he is their Steve Largent receiver. And so we talk a lot, and Brian has come to a couple of our games here and stayed with us. And so, these are, again, lifelong friends, right? And certainly have a whole lot of them from those days.
Well, Jack, you were nicknamed the Throwin Samoan. Can you share with us kind of how that got started, and how did you embrace it right away, or what was that like for you?
Well, it was when I first saw that name in print. We were in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was 1976. It was after we played. This picture behind me. That picture was, I know there's a glare there, but that picture was taken at the Minnesota game, 1976. It was the second game of the year, and that was the game that I kind of snuck onto the field, and that's how I got my starting position. I can go into that later, but that game was the game that was a catalyst to my starting for my whole career. But so the following week, we traveled back to the Midwest, and we were playing Wisconsin. And Saturday morning when I woke up, that picture was on the cover of the Madison newspaper, the sports page. And it said, "The Throwin Samoan is in town." I'm thinking, whoa. That's the first time I've ever seen that. And the story has it that was a article that was Madison paper picked up, that was written by a Spokesman Review sports writer, Harry Missildine. And he was the guy that coined the nickname Throwin Samoan. The first time I ever heard that. And he asked the question, how was I with it? Well, there were other nicknames that were being thrown out there for me. But I took that one, and I had a conversation with my dad, and I said, "What do you think of this nickname? They're trying to give this nickname to me." This is my dad's simple logic, a lot of wisdom. He goes, "Well, are you Samoan?" I said, "Of course I am." And he says, "Do you throw a football?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad, yes." He says, "Well, why wouldn't you?" He said, "Are you proud of being a Samoan?" I said, "Of course." He says, "So what's wrong with that nickname? You should like it. You should." He didn't say embrace it. Yeah, you should go with that. That's how it
That's
stuck.
awesome.
I'll tell you, if my dad didn't like it, game over. Game over.
Yeah. Jack, one of the things I feel like nobody talks about that 77 team is you also beat number 14 Cal in Pullman later that season.
Yeah, it was I think that was the fourth game. I mean, talking about a hell of a schedule. The first game that year we played against Nebraska. The second game we go to Michigan State, and we beat them in East Lansing. The third game of the year, we went back to Kansas, and we got screwed on a last minute 3-pointer, a field goal. We were down by 2 points, and it was a last minute drive, and we drove it down. We got it down to 20-yard line or something like that. And Paul Watson, our kicker, who was a great kicker, he kicks it, and the stands behind the goalposts, they were standing up, and then they sat down because they saw it go through. And the ref underneath the left goalpost, he waves it off. And
Wow.
I can't believe that they took that away from us. And so we would have been 3-0. Then we come home and we played Cal at Pullman, and we did a good job against them, beat them.
Yeah, that was a tough era because not only did you have a tough schedule, a slightly shorter schedule, to make it to a bowl game was difficult. You basically had to be undefeated or have
Right.
1 or 2 losses, and that was it. So
There was only, 2 teams from the Pac-12 my senior year that can go to a bowl game. And my junior and sophomore year, only one. Either you go to the Rose Bowl or you're not going anywhere. Yeah, that was, well, you dug deep for those statistics there, Drew.
I'm telling you, Jack, I was raised on this stuff. This Letterman's jacket back here is my great grandfather's. He played baseball here in the East, and then my grandpa played football here in the early '60s. So yeah, it's like it's not to not to be anti-religion here, but it's been like my Bible kind of growing up here. It's
Yeah.
the stories and the tradition. It's pretty rich. And so when I told my family I was interviewing Jack Thompson, they're all pretty excited. They met you at the Rose Bowl back in 2003 and got to spend some time with you. So
Nice.
all good things to say for sure.
That's great.
So you talked about Brian Kelly, you talked about Levin Seller. So I listened to the QB interview on Jason Puckett's show. Awesome show, by the way. Every Coug should be listening to him as much as possible. And I know that when the question was asked, it's the end of the game. You gotta go score. Who are you putting under center to win the game? And you said yourself, which I love. Now, but here's my question. What wide receivers would you have out there with you? And you can't say yourself again. You gotta pick somebody else.
Well, okay, I would normally say my receiver. People don't realize this, but my 2 receivers were outstanding. Levin Seller, and all the years that we were teammates, he dropped 1 pass, catchable ball. That was against USC in the Kingdom. And we were driving, and what happened was the free safety came out of midfield, and he was blitzing. And Mike broke off his route and ran a slant, a blitz control slant. And oh my gosh, he was so open. And I threw the ball. I'm thinking this is a 60-yard touchdown, hands down, right? And he went up to get the ball, and he looked like there's no one there. This is it. And when he went back, the ball went through his hands. And that was the only catch or catchable ball that he missed his whole career with me. So he was a phenomenal. My 2 receivers, Mike and Brian, they were students of the game. And they ran routes that will just blow your mind. And Levy, the things that he learned from our coach under Jackie Sherrill, our wide receiver coach, the things that he taught those 2 stayed with those 2 when they went on to their other careers. Brian used those same techniques when he went up and had a Hall of Fame career in Canada. And Mike, when he had that long career as a wide receiver coach, offensive coordinator for Mike Price, he brought all those lessons that he learned in route running, the whole bit. So we had several generations of Cougar wide receivers that were literally taught by the best. And so I would take those 2. But we've had our share of great receivers since then. There's no doubt about that. But I can't not take them because they're great. They're great.
Love that loyalty that you have there. As far as that goes with those receivers, and you've seen some in recent years, are there any that kind of stick out to you that you're like, wow, this kid's really special. He's just different. I mean, obviously we've had many, but who in particular stands out to you?
Jason Hill. He was, if I remember correctly, he was a bigger wide receiver, bigger than most, but well, he was tremendous. And Kyle Williams, just recently, goodness gracious, he beat, who's the Heisman Trophy winner?
Travis Hunter.
Travis Hunter. Made him look bad. Made him look really bad when we beat the crap out of the Buffaloes in Pullman, right? And Shadir had a nightmarish game. Didn't he get tackled in number 80? Our Brian Jackson.
Well, they had Brennan Jackson and Ron Stone just all over him all night.
Ron Stone sacked him, fumbled, and BJ picked up the ball and got a touchdown. I mean, that was epic. what we did to those guys that night.
Yeah, I didn't blame him for taking off his helmet and heading into the locker room that night. If I had those guys chasing after me, I'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah, 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 and take off his Rolex, right?
Yeah, yeah. Helmet and
Doing
Rolex
this
came
all
off
the
that night.
time.
Diamond
Yeah.
stud Rolex.
Yeah, exactly. We
No,
gotta
that
now get
oh,
Watch
definitely.
and we gotta get Jack an NIL deal now.
There we go.
Yeah, just 50 years too late. What can I say?
Darn. Well, obviously we've spoken to a lot of different players, including yourself, but there's been stories on the back end of you really assisting coaching staffs in helping to recruit players. Can you share any of those stories and maybe who they were and what those experiences were like?
Well, the two that come to mind, closer to my generation, but they're still younger than me, was Mark Rippon. So when I was a senior, Mark was a junior in high school. And Coach Walden told me, we got this kid out of Shada Park in Spokane. And I met him when he was a junior. And, like I told you, I love him as a guy. I mean, as a friend. And he was that way when he was a junior in high school, just the greatest personality. And I came back and I told Coach Walden, man, we got to get that kid. He'd be a perfect Coug, big, great arm, great athlete. I mean, he was a star basketball, baseball player. But again, he had that personality that really fit the the Cougars thing, right? And the other one was Drew Bledsoe. I remember Coach Price called me and asked me, would you mind if we took your number out of retirement if we can get this kid? And I asked him, describe him to me. And he says, boy, when he was describing him to me, it reminded me a lot of Mark Rippon. Tall, big, strong, but Drew's a bit more slender, but still a strong quarterback, strong arm quarterback. And I said, if this is what it would take to get, he said, this guy is the number one recruit in the state. And boy, if we can get him. And his father, Mac, played for the Huskies, so we were really pushing hard to get this kid. And I said, sure. But as it turned out, he didn't want 14. He took 11.
Let's go.
Dodged the bullet.
And but yeah, and Drew, another just a fantastic guy, and got to know his family, his brother, Adam. And football is such a wonderful, wonderful way to meet people and to see them. When watch them play and under fire and how they react, and your respect grows for them. And I've been able to see a lot of QBs under fire and come out, pretty steadily.
Well, I'm glad you convinced him because I would have a different first name if Drew wasn't our quarterback when my parents were at Washington State.
I did, I wish I could take credit for it, but no, I didn't convince either of the two. I was just, part of the team recruiting them. Those two really stand out to me.
Yep. We talk about loyalty and we look around at all the kids that, transferring every year, playing for 4 different colleges and 4 different seasons. Now, I know you played in a slightly different era, but still, you had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different head coaches during your time at Washington State, starting with Jim Sweeney, Jackie Sherrill, Warren Powers, and eventually Jim Walden. What made you stay at Washington State through all that turmoil?
Well, quick story around that. What caused me to stay in my 4th year for Jim Walden. Now, in your research, Drew, did you ever find out the time when I went down to LA to do a movie, but it was a casting call for the Hurricane. I got a letter from Dino De Laurentiis. He is a producer director, and he said, I saw a picture of you in the LA Times, and would you come down? We'll fly you down, and we'd like for you to do a screen test, okay? And our director was a guy named Roman Polanski. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that name, but he, he was an award-winning director, movie director. Anyway, I go down there, and when we're down there, this is after, um, you know, Warren Powers had left, and they're going to name a new head coach, and they named Jim Walden. And while we were down there, I was with my attorney. This is what I'm getting to. And I looked at his name's Carl Lopez. I said, Carl, by the way, I never got the part, but we were down there having a great time uh, on these people from Hollywood. And we got to talking. And Carl, I've known since I was in fifth grade. He got his law degree at Georgetown. And I looked at him. I said, man, do I go back for my senior year? And he did some researching and called a lot of teams because I could have gone pro after my junior year because that was my graduating class, 74, class of 78, graduating. It was projected if I had gone in that year, I would have been like the 18th or 19th pick in the first round to the Green Bay Packers. And so um, I wasn't, I didn't enjoy, going through three head coaches. But here I was talking to Carl. I said, what are your thoughts? What do you think I should do? And he looked at me, he goes, where are you going to live the rest of your life? I said, probably, well, in Washington, Seattle, probably. And he looked at me, he says, and mind you, he ended up being my agent. And he looked at me, he says, I really think you should go back your senior year. He says, I know you. I know you're pissed off at, four coaches in 4 years. And, I was pissed off at people leaving us, right? And going to our school. And he said, you should go back. It will be a decision you'll never regret because whatever happens on the football field, if I learned anything from you about Washington State University, the Cougs are loyal and they help each other. And, with that in mind, I said, let's do it. So we flew back from LA. We heard that Jim Walden was hired and we had a press conference in Spokane. And that's when I announced I was coming back. Yeah, because again, it's the loyalty thing that got me in. And you guys got to you understand these are different days. These are different times now. And just certainly that didn't exist when I was playing, and a lot of different things to consider. But really, the only risk is if I had gotten hurt my senior year and, that whole thing. I'm glad, no regrets that I came back my senior year. I got the crap knocked out of me that because all my class had graduated and left, and we had a fairly young team to bring it into the fold. But no regret, and true to form, the Cougs have never left me.
Well, I know that your team's never quite got it done, but I do believe that you coming back for Walden's first year was probably the catalyst that led eventually to that 1981 Holiday Bowl team that finally broke the bowl drought.
I'll take credit for that. Thanks, Drew. You made this interview worth it for me. No, it's just one of those things. I just got tired of the crap. The revolving door. And I hated Washington State. The thought of Washington State University being viewed through those lenses, through those coaches' lenses for leaving. I wish Warren Powers had stuck around another year because he did some really unique things. But, that being said, Jim Walden did for us what our school needed. He stopped the revolving door, he brought a culture of belief in one another. To your point, Drew, put together that team that took us to the 1981 Holiday Bowl, and we should have won that game.
Yes, we should.
Moving to Spokane, talking about loyalty and whatnot, and wanting to do anything he can to help move the ball forward for us. And I'm a big believer in this. I feel like my mission is to try to do all that I can to engage, energize Eastern Washington Cougs, the Inland Empire Cougs. We have, the last I heard, we have like 57,000 plus Cougs alums on the east side. On the west side, it's more like 70,000. We have a total of 245,000. You heard these stats with Gleno, right? But, Spokane has to be for Pullman what Portland is to Oregon and Oregon State. They're connected by I-5. It's a longer drive from Portland to Corvallis and Eugene than it is from Spokane to Pullman, right? Now, I hope to someday, any chance I get, I'm going to, lobby like heck, the politicians here. We need a 4-lane highway from Spokane to Pullman, because now with the Pac-12, we got Gonzaga here. It'd be safe. There'd be a lot more people going back and forth throughout, all the different seasons, because there's women's basketball, there's baseball, there's, tennis, and Gonzaga being in the Pac-12, they got to make it more safe and more accessible. And, I'm going to lobby hard for that. But the bottom line is, the sustainable model for getting butts in the seats is energizing Eastern Washington Cougs to do our thing.
Amen.
And that includes Tri-Cities. There are no more rabid Cougs than those Tri-City Cougs, right? And I'm extending
Walla Walla.
Really, in Walla Walla. And I can see it happening. I really can. And I can see it. And I told this to Jimmy Rogers. I said, you have no idea what you're walking into, the potential here. We just need the right coach, be that coach for us. And you can have a coaching experience par excellence. I've been here when Coach Price was here and packed Martin Stadium. It's crazy. I'm on the sidelines. We're playing against USC. Remember that, Drew? When
Oh yeah.
you drove, who's their quarterback that they had?
Carson Palmer.
No.
This was before.
It was before. Yeah.
Who? It was before that.
Yeah.
Right? And they drove and they scored a touchdown to win the game. I kid you not. I was on the turf like this, and the stadium was rocking. And then it's happened so many times, over the years. It can happen again. It will happen again with the right coach, with the right coaching staff. And that's my mission here, is to get the Cougs to understand that it's within our power to make Washington State great again, and we just need to realize that and embrace it and do it. God bless Gonzaga. They have a great basketball team and the whole bit. And without that basketball program, they could have easily gone bankrupt. I remember when I was playing, Gonzaga was this far away from that. It was moribund, the program, but to their credit, and Coach Few bringing a powerhouse culture, and look what it's done for that school, right? But the Cougars should own Spokane and own this Inland Empire, period. And we need, how many alums do they have in this area? Last I heard, I got to find out the true number, but it's like 11,000.
In total, they have 42,000, according to what Glenn reported to us. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be crushing them in all aspects.
We can't be taking, crap.
Yeah.
We need to embrace who we are, what we are. I don't care what anyone says. We're us in Oregon State. We're the leaders of the Pac-12. Act like it. Last quick story I'll share with you. When I moved here, my neighbor, great guy, we become great friends. And I met him in our backyard. And, I was out there and he came over, introduced himself, just a super good guy. And he said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." And I said, "Yeah, I heard you're a Coug." He said, "Yeah, I am." And I looked at, he was wearing a Gonzaga shirt. I said, yeah. And I said, what's that? And, and I just met him. And and he's kind of apologetic. He goes, a lot of us Cougs, he was kind of fidgeting. He said, a lot of us Cougs, have, season tickets to the Gonzaga. I said, time out. We got to deal with reality, right? And, well, we were supporting him. I said, I'm going to tell you something. Our Cougs, your Cougs, we need your dollars more than they do. They don't need us. Cougars need us. And we have to, if that's the role we serve as far as, putting a mirror up to a fellow Cougs around here, I will. And I don't give a rip. At my age, doesn't matter. I'm just going to speak my mind, respectfully, mind you. We need to understand who we are and what we represent in this area. Without Washington State University, Spokane would really suck.
Yep.
Yes.
Totally agree.
We got a beautiful campus here. We got a medical school here. And, thank God for Elson Floyd and his vision. And yes, we need to step up and step out. And when I was living in Seattle, tell me how sick it was for me to deal with those purple guys. But that's their city. God bless you. I came over here. Not that we will never be as arrogant as that. We can't sit back, and expect the others to step up. We need to step up. And we had a meeting of former athletes of Washington State University that live in Spokane. We had a nice meeting, and that was a message I took to them. So when you leave here, we had like 70 guys, people there. I said, when you leave here tonight, preach this. We need to message this. Tell your neighbors, who are Cougs especially. Washington State University needs our support. And Spokane, Eastern Washington can blow the lid off of that for us. And if we could just focus on that. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I completely agree. Spokane is a sleeping giant. And really, like, to your point, it's going to take a mentality shift here amongst the fan base. I listen to all the excuses. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's too far away. It's too expensive. The list goes on and on. And here's the reality. When we've been good, none of that mattered.
None of that matters.
So why aren't we showing up? Why aren't we, if we can ignore the excuses, then we should ignore them every day and show up and be a part of it. Because here's the other thing. It's fun to do. Coming to Pullman, being back on campus, it's such a great experience. It's like a family gathering, whether you win or lose. It's awesome.
Brain kids. Brainwashing begins when they're kids. There's so many activities. And I'm on the game experience committee with Glenham. And we want to make that family friendly experience. And, we're fighting tooth and nail to bring back, I'll say it. We need to bring back Dad and Mom's weekends. Are you kidding me? Whoever came up with that idea, my gosh.
Yeah, my wife's sister went to UW, unfortunately, and they had family weekend for a really long time. And I remember vividly when we were students here, her saying, I so wish we had Moms and Dads weekend like you guys do, because it seems like so much more fun.
Because it is. It was. Yeah. And, we need to bring it back. And if I don't know if either one of you asked for the question, but I haven't met Dr. Cantwell yet, but I've already gotten a message to her. We need to bring it back. Get off this whatever that mindset was. I'm sure it was well intended. Well, it didn't work.
Right.
I have a friend that has a business there on Dad's weekends, and he showed me on Dad's weekends for 4 years they were doing 6 figures sales, right? And then literally the subsequent weekends, I think they call it family weekend, low 5 figures. He lost way over half of sales. But he was not the only Pullman business that suffered like that. Learn the lesson. Let's get on with it. If there's 8 if there's anything I've learned as a Coug, there is not a more pragmatic group of people than Cougs. You know, if you're wrong, admit it. Let's go on. Let's move on. Make the decision. Let's move on. Let's move on together. You don't mess with her, and I love it. I'm talking about being pragmatic. From what I understand, she really has a great business instincts, and her history of what she did for Utah State got them into the Pac-12, and did some serious fundraising. I guess, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that she had let go an AD and a football coach. Then she hired Mendenhall, and I mean, she's a forward-thinking leader, and we need that moving forward. I'm really excited I think I'll get a chance to meet her this weekend.
All right, now we've talked a little bit about some of the different ways that Cougs can get involved, from packing the stadium, supporting the Cougar Athletic Fund, attending these Cougs First events. But one piece that we haven't quite mentioned yet is the Cougar Collective and how important that is for fans to get involved with.
Well, one that just jumps out at me is everyone can get involved with the 1890 Club. As you know, that been a part of the Cougar Collective, one of the founders of it. Very proud to say that, by the way, because we're doing the best we can to help move the needle for our athletics. And really, I get why people are skittish about the new era of sports, but this is the environment we find ourselves in. But beauty of it all is that we can compete in this space if we all join it. And the 1890 Club, $18.90 a month. I mean, it's simple math. If we can get 10,000 members, we'll be able to compete against any other NIL or collective out there. And it's the lift is made a lot lighter the more people we can get. Bottom line, it's a classic case of, think about people, how many Cougs buy the license plates.
Yeah,
I think it's 26,000 a year, right?
Right.
And if we had that, again, we'd be killing it. And Jed Collins, Jedzilla,
Yep.
I think he coined the phrase "mighty by many." And if ever there was a group that it can resonate with, it's the Cougar alumni base, because we're crazy that way. We buy shirts and hats, better, more than anyone else. But the 1890 Club, you can really move the needle. And that's my spiel for the Cougar Collective, because we're doing the best we can, and we are moving the needle. And with everyone's help, we'll really bust this thing loose.
Before we wrap up here, Jack, what are we've talked with Glenn about the new chapter, the new era. We got a new athletic director, relatively new, a new president, a new football coach. What are you the most excited about the new chapter at Washington State?
It's a new beginning, and it could be as whatever we want to make it, right? This is as good a time to press the refresh button. Let's get together on this, and I put out the challenge to the diehard Cougs. I say that, tongue in cheek, but I think they should rename that, the diehard whiners, perhaps, and, but with you diehard Cougs, when you see these diehard whiners whine, call them out.
Yeah.
That's, that element is not the culture that I or either one of you two, I think, would agree with me. It's not the Cougar culture. I'm sorry.
It's not.
You may have the power of, typing, I call them keyboard warriors, or you suddenly have a case of keyboard courage, You have no idea that the crap that you're spewing, And in the meantime, people like you, like me, like Leno, we're working our asses off to try. If you have something to bring to the table, bring it, be positive about it. Because, it's not going to work being negative. I don't know. I choose not to live my life that way.
I agree.
Elson Floyd, I tell you, there's some I learned from Elson Floyd, and this is, I think, the way I am naturally. But he was addressing the foundation, the board of trustees, and he said, I have no problem if you have if you want to whine about something, come to me, but don't come to me with a whining and leave without giving me a solution. Anyone can whine, bitch, and complain, but come with a potential solution. Now you're helping me move the ball, and I totally believe in that. Totally believe in that. And we can whine all day long about the Pac-12 blowing up, right? And how the Huskies screwed us in that. But that's in our rearview mirror. We gotta put the blinders on. I can't stay back there. I need focus out there, and this is where true Cougs can step up. I was talking to Gleno, and we were talking about, can you imagine if 5% of the 240,000 plus alums we have, if 5% chose to step up and donate $50 a month. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. If there's any group that can do it, it's the Washington State Cougs, the alumni base, because we're crazy that way. That's why we came up with the Cougs First business network, and why that's taken off. And speaking of Cougs First, make sure that you guys are there for the Cougs First show on May the 9th at, what's it, Maidenbauer Center in Bellevue. It's always a fun event. And we'll have 70 plus exhibitors, and we're expecting 800 plus Cougs. There should be 1,500 Cougs there. It's free.
Yep.
You'll come and you get to see Cougs in all different facets of business, from hotels to mortgage companies. And
Hey,
Shout out to Cross Country Mortgage with Jack Thompson there.
Mortgage. Thank you. Right on cue there, Darren. But these are the things we need to band together, and nothing more fun than a bunch of Cougs getting together and celebrating whatever it is, a football game, business networking event, to whatever it is. And then that evening is the night with Cougar Athletics at the Bellevue Hyatt. So we're Glenn. I love Glenn and I'm giving him credit for this. He says, we are bringing Pullman to you. We're bringing WSU to you, Cougs on the west side, right?
Yeah.
And then in October, we'll have our second show here in Spokane. So just get involved. Again, support the football program. But if you're not supporting the football program, support whatever school at Washington State you choose to support. They all need our help, but we can do it.
We definitely can.
Well, we'll be there. We'll be one of the exhibitors. Jack,
Right.
you're welcome to come on. We're going to be doing a live show from the Cougs First event in Bellevue there, so it should be great. We're hoping to talk to lots of Cougs, make sure everybody gets a chance to shout out their businesses on the podcast.
I'll be heckling you guys.
All right, let's go. Perfect.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Heckler.
That'll be awesome. We're looking forward to it. One last quick question. We've talked a little bit about the current state of the football program. What are your initial thoughts on the Jimmy Rogers hired? What are you excited about with him leading the helm?
As serious as a heart attack. All right. This dude is no BS guy. You can tell he was a linebacker, and the things that I've observed, I love the way his coaching staff interacts, that culture that they have. I was just talking to Danny Frun today, our offensive coordinator, and he goes, yeah, Jimmy is serious. He doesn't mess around. But I'll tell you what, the coaching staff loves working for him, and it's really obvious. And they take their cue from him. But they are guys with really fun personalities. Now, that cracks me up. You guys know that Mike Iapati is one of our offensive line coaches. When he and I are on the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame together. I love Mike. But 6'6", 320 pounds. And when you meet him, you're not taken by his size as much as you are, with his smile and his bubbly personality. And he has a higher pitched voice. But you look at him, and then other football players are coming around him, and they have their shoulder pads on, but they're not as big as he is. It's amazing. And then the realization hits home that, this guy, he was like an all-pro 3 years, and out on the football field, he'd kick your ass and then pick you up. And he's one of those players, and it's just amazing the fact that he's coaching for the Cougs, and he's coaching for he really. I've talked to him. He really enjoys working for Jimmy. And people don't know this, but Jim Harbaugh had him as San Francisco 49ers when he drafted him first round. And he was doing some coaching for Jim Harbaugh the Chargers. And Jimmy offered him an opportunity to stay, and coach. But thankfully, his wife says, we're not going to live in L.A. They have a house here in Idaho by Boise. I guess he said, well, can I coach at Washington State?
Nice.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's awesome.
Hopefully we can get his wife over here with their kids, and this could be their second home.
Right. That'd be perfect.
And to have him on the sidelines, I've talked to several other coaches. They love him. But, the esprit de corps on this coaching staff is really fun to watch. And you see it in the way the players play and interact, and they're having fun out there. But the pace of their practices is awesome. There's no staying around. Jimmy's not going to let that.
What I heard is that the players actually show up a full hour before every single practice. And they don't just show up, they get out on the field and they start doing drills. They start working on their craft, which is something that he started at his former school. So that's a big culture move.
Surprise me. If we play our cards right, this could be our mark few. And I mean that. And I've been kind of quiet about that. But, if we help create an environment that's conducive to, like in the stadium, doesn't matter who we play, we pack the stadium. Jimmy's the kind of guy that will deliver what we need delivered on the field, because he'll demand that from his players, and he will get the players that he needs to make that happen. And I believe that. And in the meantime, my job is to, like I said, try to energize Eastern Washington Cougs, the Inland Empire. I've always loved that term, Inland Empire. Sounds really cool. And we need to rule the Inland Empire again.
Absolutely.
Again.
Well, Jack, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Your impact on Washington State, not just on the field, but off the field, and all the things that you do, from Cougs First, the Cougar Athletic Fund, and even just mentoring the current players. It's really it's hard to even put into words all that you've done for Washington State. So again, we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, and go Cougs.
Go Cougs. Cougs. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.